Each and every man under my command owes me 100 Nazi scalps. And I want my scalps.
Once upon a time in Nazi-occupied France. Welcome to another episode of Short Subjects, a video essay series here on my channel. On today's episode, we will take a look at Inglourious Basterds. Released in 2009, directed and written by Quentin Tarantino, starring Brad Pitt, Melanie Laurent, Christoph Waltz, Eli Roth, Michael Fassbender, Diane Kruger, Daniel Bruhl, Til Schweiger, B.J. Novak, August Diehl, and Julie Dreyfus, with appearances by Mike Myers and Rod Taylor. Inglourious Basterds is a World War II film. Well, let me rephrase. It's a film that takes place during World War II. It follows three different storylines that all converge into one hell of a climax. The first storyline follows Lieutenant Aldo Raine, played by Brad Pitt, and his band of Jewish American soldiers, known as the Titular Bastards, as they go behind enemy lines and kill, maim, and torture Nazis. The film also follows Colonel Hans Landa, or the Jew Hunter, as he tracks down enemies of the state, whether they be Jews in hiding or the bastards themselves. And the final storyline belongs to Shoshana Dreyfus, who escaped massacre of her family at the hands of Landa and now lives in Paris, hiding in plain sight. Warning, spoilers ahead. Everyone talks about Reservoir Dogs, Kill Bill, and of course Pulp Fiction. Tarantino adds to his already legendary film canon with Inglourious Basterds. This film just plain works on every single level. First and foremost, let's start with the story. Tarantino divides this film into 5 separate chapters. Each one of these chapters furthers the overall plot of the film, while at the same time being so self-contained that they almost feel like their own short film. In fact, long periods of time take place between the chapters that are never explained. But it doesn't really matter. Tarantino trusts the audience enough to piece it together. 3 scenes in particular stand out: the opening scene at the dairy farm, the restaurant scene between Landa and Shoshana, and the basement tavern scene.
You're sheltering enemies of the state, are you not?
These scenes are so well written and so wrought with tension that they will be studied and analyzed for years in film classes and textbooks. One of the things QT always does well in his scripts is character development. Well, in this film he had the additional task of setting up a lot of really heavy exposition. Tarantino in most of his films does something that most screenwriters should take note of. He builds characters and delivers exposition without even noticing he's doing it. He does it by burying these elements deep within a conversation between 2 characters that would otherwise seem meaningless, or he distracts you from the exposition by showing you something else. It's a sleight of hand screenwriting. The best example of this is the Royale with cheese discussion in Pulp Fiction. In Bastards, he does this expertly in a few scenes: the aforementioned dairy farm conversation, the basement tavern scene, and the interrogation of Bridget von Hammersmark in the veterinarian's office. Speaking of character development, I don't believe there has ever been a more well-written character than Hans Landa. Hans Landa is an absolutely evil, vile, and deplorable human being. But what is most disturbing about the character is that the audience is put in a position to respect the man. He's a twisted Sherlock Holmes. In fact, he even busts out a comically large Holmes-esque pipe in an early scene, who was damn good at his job. On top of that, the character has a very pleasant and charming demeanor, which makes him all the more unsettling.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
You just say bingo.
And of course, you can't talk about Landa without talking about the magnificent performance of Christoph Waltz. Sometimes Academy Awards are handed out because someone is a sentimental favorite or because of politics. Waltz deserves every square centimeter of that little gold statue, as he absolutely gave the best performance of the year, supporting or otherwise. Landa deserves a spot on any list of the greatest movie villains. The film also gives us 2 other very memorable characters. The first is Lieutenant Aldo Raine, played by the scenery-chewing Brad Pitt. What's great about Aldo is that he is at once comical and menacing. Yes, he is kind of a buffoon, especially when trying to speak Italian, but he's on a mission and he won't stop until it's completed. Raine could have a whole movie dedicated to himself. Tarantino touches on some of his background throughout the film. He's a descendant of mountain men and Indians, he sells moonshine, he fought his way through Sicily, and what is with that scar on his neck? These questions are never really expanded upon, which gives the character a great level of mystery and depth. The other great character is Shoshana Dreyfus, who has now become my favorite female character of all time and whom I named my daughter after. After surviving the slaughter of her family, Shoshana, a Jew in hiding, goes to France, owns an art house cinema, is in a relationship with a black man in Nazi-occupied France, no less, and develops a plot to kill Hitler. I love this woman. Speaking of Hitler, I appreciate the fact that he is not the villain of the film, or better put, not the main antagonist of the film. The chief antagonist is Landa, and in fact, Hitler is made to look comical, weak, and ridiculous. If it wasn't for his real-life atrocities, the way he is presented in the film, he really poses no threat to the heroes. This brings me to the ending of the film. As you know, and if you don't know, you were warned about the spoilers, Hitler is killed during Operation Kino. The bastards get him. Obviously, this is not how he actually met his demise. The film realizes it's a revenge fantasy, and the payoff to that has to end in Hitler's death, or it wouldn't work. Tarantino revisits this revenge fantasy element in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I have heard some complaints that the movie is barely in English, which is a ridiculous complaint. What I love about the film is that the Americans in English speak English, the French, and the Germans German, especially when language is a key part of the story, as it depends on certain characters being able to go undercover. It's a stupid criticism. The cinematography is also worth noting. Robert Richardson, the DP of this film, was brought on board after doing a great job on the Kill Bill films. Bastards takes it a notch further. For the first time, you get to see Tarantino do a large-scale picture, and the cinematography is so beautiful, it looks epic. The last point I really want to make is about the obvious theme that pervades this film. The theme of the film is film itself. Tarantino has a famous quote, "I didn't go to film school, I went to films." Tarantino has had a long-running love affair with cinema itself. All of his movies contain subtle and blatant references to the films he loves. Make no mistake that at the end of the day, Inglourious Basterds is Tarantino's love letter to the movies. From his shout-out to movies like The Searchers and Sergeant York, or naming the movie itself after a cult B-movie from the 1970s, the power of cinema as a tool is exploited by the Nazis in this film with their propaganda movie, Nation's Pride. Two major characters have film backgrounds. Shoshana owns an art house cinema, and Michael Fassbender's Lieutenant Hickok's close resemblance to Hitchcock pre-war occupation was that of a film critic. The mission is to blow up a mess ton of Nazis in a movie theater, and it's named Operation Kino, which is fantastic. But on top of all that, what is the instrument of destruction used to kill the Nazis? Reels and reels of highly flammable nitrate film. If that doesn't scream power of film, I don't know what does. In the final image of this film, Aldo Raine, after having branded Hans Landa with a swastika, looks down at the camera and says,
"You know something, you rich? I think this just might be my masterpiece."